Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Masculine Mastery, the show where we talk about things that matter to men. I'm your host, Dr. Asif, and with me today we've got brother Craig, aka Abu American. You might have seen online, YouTube, Patreon, various pieces online where he talks about Muslim masculinity, and particularly in the context of multiple wives, co-wifing, polygyny, polyandry, polygamy, whatever you want to call it. But subhanAllah, brother Craig is with us today to talk about things which are contemporary to Muslim men, particularly Muslim men living in the West. Craig's now residing in Germany, I believe, but he's from America. Craig, welcome.
Thank you. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Glad to be here. Jazakallah khair.
No, thank you for your time. So, do you like to be called Craig or Abu Talha or Abu American or?
Yeah, Abdurrahman, preferably.
Okay, mashallah. Good. And tell me about your journey to Islam, please.
Wow. Well, that started in Germany. I was with the military, working with the military. That was during the first Gulf War. And what happened was a lot of soldiers went to Saudi Arabia. They were staged in Saudi Arabia. And the Saudis, just mashallah, they have a good way of giving dawah. And something like 60% of U.S. forces that actually went there became Muslim. And of that 60%, something like 80% of those reverts were women. But anyway, a high school friend, he came back and he started telling me about Islam. And, he was a white guy. And I was like, you can't be Muslim. You're a white guy. He's like, no, it doesn't work like that. And so, when I realized I didn't know anything about Islam, I listened to what he told me. And it just, it just really resonated with me because it appeals to both your logical and your spiritual side, because we have the science of the religion, the science of the hadith, of tasfir, tasfir of the Quran on, all these types of things. And so it was just really like, okay, wow, this is actually, we have an analytical side. We actually have a spiritual side. And so it's not like, I don't want to trash the Christians, but it's just all belief and there's no like real sciences behind it.
Right. So it's appealed to your kind of, let's say, inner animal, the primal needs. And, one of them is, has been legislated as having more than one wife. The second one is a rational need. Your need to be a sapient being, intellectual, rational being. And it's like you said, it's not blind faith, nor is it restrictive. Islam doesn't say go to the mountains and be a hermit. Islam is perfectly balanced. It's in harmony with one's nature. And as a doctor, I certainly see that. A lot of diseases we have, overeating, lack of exercise, and drinking, for instance, and promiscuity. All these things can be averted by following, God's last given book.
Indeed, so, absolutely.
That's interesting. So you went to your outpost in Germany in the military. So your military background, did it tie up with Islam? Because I know, in the military, a lot of people that go to Muslim countries, Iraq, Afghanistan, the so-called war on terror, North Africa, for instance, as well. How did that tie in when you accepted Islam?
I mean, for me, it wasn't related to like any actual travels to the countries at the time. I hadn't been to any Middle Eastern country. But after I became Muslim, that's when my travels to the Middle Eastern countries actually started. And then I traveled the entire Gulf. I've been to Jordan. I've been to Lebanon. I've been kind of like all over the place, just kind of looking for a place to call home, amongst the Muslims. So, I'm still looking, but during that time, with the military, there was really no connection in that sense with being in a location because I wasn't deployed. My friend actually came back from a deployment from Saudi Arabia and he was telling me about it. So at that time, there was no real connection between like location and for me, for Islam, it was just, like I said, it more resonated with just like the natural state, like you were just talking about. It's just an example, like polygyny. It's the natural state of men to desire multiple women. It's just our natural state, how Allah is created. It's our fitra. And Islam didn't, unlike, my previous religion, didn't try and deny that to you. Same thing with turning the other cheek when they say if your enemy strikes you, turn the other cheek. No, in Islam, we have the right to protect ourselves, and so all of these things just tied together and really, hammered home.
Good. And what was your age at the time of accepting Islam?
Ooh, I was 21, 22-ish.
Right,
yeah,
okay.
21, 22-ish.
So still a young man coming into his own. And then, how did the military background, because I know they read a lot of stoicism, they try to get a mindset, stoic, steel mindset. How did that then with Islam? Islam says something similar, always think about the other life, trying to be faith focused, trying to be afterlife focused. have this stoic mentality. And in our faith, we have the most amazing example of the man who went through the most pain, losing his children, seeing his wife suffer from starvation, being chastised, castigated, so many things Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, went through. So we have a walking, talking example of absolute stoicism. So how did the military stoicism, the whole concept of developing an iron mindset, this kind of, personality, marry up with Islam as well?
I mean, the military teaches you a lot of lessons. I mean, if there wasn't like a lot of questions behind it in terms of like, Muslim serving and non-Muslim militaries, I would say everybody should join the military. It teaches you discipline. That's one of the most important things that you need. As we know, you need to be disciplined for the salah, making your prayers on time, or if at all. Some people, they struggle with the discipline of actually making the salah at all, but they consider themselves Muslims. And then when you have people who make the salah, you have people who make it outside of the proper times. All these things are related to discipline and obviously belief, iman, but discipline also helps. And so when you can discipline your soul, because that's really what you're doing, you're controlling your soul and you can discipline it, then you can literally almost master anything. So that I would say from the first things that you learn in the military is discipline, because they really instill the idea of discipline. Next, excuse me, is the concept of brotherhood. Now, we always like to speak of ummah and whatnot, and having brothers and sisters in Islam. The military really instills the idea in you of brotherhood, because really, when you go through basic training and then you go into your individual deployments and units and whatnot, the man next to you who's deployed with you, that guy is your lifeline, quite literally. Your hand is in your life is in his hands. Yeah. He could be your life or death, and you could be his life or death. And nobody has the option to fail. It's not an option to fail to let your buddy die. Like they said, no man left behind. They got bodies in the field. You got to go get them. That's your brother. Yeah. And if he's gone, there's nobody to protect you. Mm-hmm. And if you're gone, there's nobody, to protect him. So it is just, this brotherhood is really, it becomes real. And this is why you find a lot of people like my closest brother, he comes from the military days. He became Muslim shortly after I did. I've known him 2 decades now. There's just that brotherhood that it was even strengthened even more by coming to Islam. We've held each other's children when they were born. This is a guy. So that's the next thing I would say is the brotherhood. Yeah. After that, this sense of like, I'm not really sure if it plays into Islam, but it does for me in terms of accountability, which is, it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility. This is very strong and this is driven home in Islam. And so, in the military. And so when you look at like, Allah says in the Quran that we're khayrun min nas. Well, why? Why are we the best of mankind? It's because we command the good and we forbid the evil. So we look out for our brothers in that type of thing. It's not my fault that my brother's falling in sins, but it's my responsibility. Again, we protect each other. And so this all ties in together in so many different ways. And I could go on literally for hours about how like the militaries, it just teaches you so much that if you can't carry it over into Islam, you're a broken person. It's just truly, you're a broken person. Hierarchies, where you like follow. Mm-hmm. It's like there's a commander, there's an imam, and then there's those who follow the imam. It's easier, what I've noticed from my brothers who have reverted, to follow the concept and the idea of an imam, that if one was to come, everybody likes to talk about, Imam Mahdi or whatever else, everybody has these discussions. The concept for a Muslim, for a paramilitary person, I trust his ability more than anybody else's. That's not to say that other people wouldn't follow properly, but it's just, he's been there. You know what I mean?
They've been trained with the military method. They've been trained. Yes. And there's no, it's no surprise. It's no accident that some of the best militaries were led by Muslim generals. We talk about Khalid bin Walid, who still to this day has some of the most decorated military records. Even his double envelopment method he kind of started, which defeated the Muslims at Uhud, was a military strategy. And when he became Muslim, it became easier for him because Islam does, talk about discipline, talks about brotherliness, talks about cooperation, codependency. You are only as strong as the weakest. The chain is only as strong as the weakest link. Indeed. Yeah, and the ummah is one. And the other thing, Abdurrahman, was I saw an example a few years ago. I went to Istanbul, I believe, and someone said, "Look, even the way we stand for salah like this is almost it's almost like a military training. You stand in lines You stand
Right.
shoulder to shoulder. This is military training, literally. You saw the Queen's funeral 2 weeks ago, the guards walking in unison. Salah is unison,
Right.
you bow down, you prostrate at the same time. And this is scarily similar to modern day militaries, where you see them walking in unison. And in terms of the practical things aside, the more mental things in the military required are discipline, codependence, but at the same time having this, we call it in the world of medicine, radical self-acceptance.
Yes.
Accepting and being responsible. The one thing I'm finding, particularly now, post 2020, is a lot of men going into depression, alcoholism, and blaming COVID, blaming something. They've got something to blame. These things, and as a doctor, I'm seeing a lot of this. Now, how important for you is it as a man to be radically self-acceptant, to have extreme ownership of your trajectory? Because we're seeing a lot of people blame their they got beard, they got dark skin, their name. You've actually adopted a Muslim name, Abdurrahman. You kept it as great. People will always have something to blame, COVID or parenthood or poverty. How important is it for you as a pinnacle of being a man to radically self-accept and therefore improve on that journey?
It's interesting that you asked this, because it's crazy, because we didn't really talk before this. And I just made a video talking about a book I want to write. And I'm not really sure if I want to write it, because it's a very, very, very personal story. But we're going to get into your question here. And I was literally talking about absolute accountability. This entire concept that I just mentioned, that it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility. COVID is not anybody's fault. It's not our fault. We didn't eat bats in China or something. That wasn't us. But it's our responsibility to make sure our outcomes remain, as the best as they possibly can. It doesn't have to be your fault, but it is your life is your responsibility. And this is where your discipline and your drive and your absolute this is my life. This is you're accountable for your outcomes. And so, I was talking in this video about just how that took me to places I shouldn't be. I mean, because I've made probably every mistake you can think of. If there's a mistake you can think of, I probably did it. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes, just blindly walking into it. Because, despite my father being a very, hardworking man, he was by far and large absent. So I had no guidance, So how important is this? It's everything. It is everything. Men need to really drill that statement into their mind. It is not my fault, but it is my responsibility. I can't tell you how important that is, how far that's taken me. Okay, now, obviously, if it's not your responsibility, it's not your responsibility. Like if some kid falls over down the street and his parents help him up, you don't run over there and or I don't know if that's a good example, but you know what I mean? If it's not your business, you're not responsible for it. But if it involves your life, if it involves the outcomes that you're going to eventually live, then it's absolute ownership. Okay, this has gone south. This didn't go according to plan. It was either by external forces, or maybe mistakes of my own. Whatever the case may be, you need to fix it. And it doesn't matter if it's hard work, because life is hard work. It was never promised that it was going to be easy for us. I don't remember reading anywhere in secular knowledge, nor in the book in the Sunnah, that life was going to be cake and ice cream. I never read that anywhere. Rather it's the opposite.
Ice cream. And in the Quran, God Almighty says, "Khalaqal insana min qabd." We created man with a heavy load. And in another verse, God Almighty says, man is forever toiling. He's toiling. He was meeting.
Allah asks you in the Quran. He says, did you think you would say you would believe and not be tested like those before you?
Yeah.
This is it. This is the dunya. The dunya is the test. And what's the option? The option to fail? It's pretty heavy. So pick your poison.
Absolutely. And again, God Almighty says, what does it say? We will test you min al-khawf, with fear, loss of life. Give good news to the patient ones, those who endure. And patience is not just wasting time. Patience is actually going about your life as if nothing happened really. You got to still go on with life, and that is to be expected. And a great example of that, responsibility, not your fault, is I heard a story once that someone said there was a knock on the door and someone had just dropped a newborn baby outside someone's door and the person just left. And the couple opened the door and now that baby is being dropped off there by someone. It's not their fault, but it is now their responsibility. And this is a true story, actually. This has happened in many countries where babies have just been dropped off. That baby is not your fault, but it is now your responsibility. And that radical self-acceptance is so vital. And I think, especially in my line of work, Abdurrahman, in coaching, I do a lot of mindset coaching. And a lot of men, particularly men anyway, I try to focus on men mainly. Men have this outsourcing. They love to outsource their problems, outsource the solutions. And it's a very, very tricky situation because you're trying to help them as a coach, but you need to just say, look, I can take you to the water, but as the horse, you have to drink yourself. And they've not been conditioned, they've been conditioned in comfort. They've been conditioned on Nintendo Wii, they've been conditioned on this instant dopamine fix. They've not been conditioned to do the hard graft, to do the hard labor, the deferred gratification. And that's why they come crashing down. COVID happens, and a lot of men just went into depression and anxiety.
Yeah. There's two things here. And maybe, I don't know if this is a mechanism that can help. I don't know. You're a professional, so you probably know it. But one thing I've noticed is that a lot of people, because I do one-to-one consultations with relationships, but it's similar I think in the same sense that what happens is a lot of people, they have a problem and it's like their nose is to the wall. And when your nose is to the wall, when you're right in that middle of that problem, it's just a matter of looking right or left. You see the window, you see the door, maybe you'll see the end of the wall. But people are so enveloped in just this problem right in front of them that they don't take the time to stop. They don't take the time to think, just settle their emotions. Like you said, sabr. Sabr is at the start of calamity. It's not when things are nice. You stop, you settle, you look left, you look right and say, okay, where am I? You take a step back, you look at the problem as a bigger picture. A lot of people don't actually take the time to do this. And when you actually walk them through these processes, then they start to see that there are actually solutions, or the problems they're really just right on top of it. It's not as big as they think it is. And that's the first thing. And then the second thing a lot of people need to understand is like, there's never going to be a hero except yourself. No one's coming to save you. Unless you're a pretty woman, then okay, sure. You got rich guys with deep pockets that'll save you. But most of us, most of your clients are most likely men, and nobody's coming to save, us bearded and mustachio guys. It just doesn't work like that. There's no rich spinsters looking for us. It's not going to happen. So we have to take on that hero mindset. This life of yours is your movie. It's your film. It's your video game, and you need to level up. You need to make yourself the strongest character in your video game, in your movie that is called your life. You have to do this. You have to perceive it like that. And a lot of guys, they literally spend time leveling up video game characters instead of leveling themselves up and making themselves the strongest possible character they can be,
Exactly. And it's very ironic because, like I said, they've got, score 80,000 on this particular avatar game, but in real life, they're out of shape. They're, spiritually weak, mentally weak, weak in many, many aspects. And leveling up is in every aspect, physically, socially, financially, and you see a lot of brothers, unfortunately, in the masjid, spiritually on deen, alhamdulillah, they pray, but terribly out of shape. They can't go up the stairs without being out of breath. And this is not from our deen. Our deen is holistic self-improvement. I read somewhere on Friday that Prophet, peace be upon him, used to have 2 sets of armor. And each armor is 10 kilograms. So imagine a 50-year-old, man in his 50s, carrying 20 kilograms of armor on him, going up hills and mountains. Just imagine that, 20 kilograms. And that goes, to show how far we've come from the ideal man in terms of the way we behave, the way we were with our spouses, the way we were with financial matters. And you're talking there, Abdurrahman, about relationship counseling or kind of, relationship coaching parts. What kind of things do you see now since COVID? What are the trends you're seeing?
Actually, I didn't see a really strong impact with COVID. Other than brothers they started marrying more women, oddly. And when I say marrying more women, I mean single brothers marrying multiple wives. That was the biggest change I saw. I'm not really sure what the connection is. I still can't put that together in my head. It's like, why did COVID cause brothers to marry multiple wives? I don't know what happened, but really I guess so. No idea. But just the problems associated with that. That's what I've seen since COVID, is like the problems associated with brothers taking multiple wives and actually having no predecessor. They have no salaf in their lifetime to actually refer back to, like, how do I deal with these situations? How do I deal with these problems? And I literally just did a video on this recently, because a consistent problem that I've seen with brothers and how they're dealing with situations, which comes from not having, in specific, this stoicism in regards to female outbursts and emotional outbursts, because that's what they are. They're emotional creatures. And that's not it's not obviously not an insult. That's just how Allah's created them. And so this lack of stoicism and this, and how this causes confusion, because again, they're looking at the problem of their wife having this meltdown. She's either sad or she's angry. She's some of both. And it puts him up in a position where he can't really see the tree from the forest, So just walking back to that.
I think so. In that case, how important is premarital counseling? Because I know in countries like in Malaysia, for a newly married couple, both the man and the woman have to go through, I believe, 16 hours of premarital counseling before the imam is legally allowed to sign their marital contract. How important is it for you then to actually go through premarital counseling? Because a lot of men, the hormones all over the place.
Yeah.
In the West, they want to get married. They don't want to fall into the life of sin, but they're not necessarily ready. And when I mean ready, I mean psychologically ready. They're not imbued with the coping mechanisms to understand female nature.
Well, it might be a positive thing, seeing how I don't think I've ever met a couple that's done premarital counseling. So maybe it's a positive thing. Maybe they're actually doing so well they don't need help. I can see the benefit to it. It's just, I would like to personally see what that looks like. A lot of times, the counseling comes in the form of like what the woman needs and what the woman expects, and not like, a reverse aspect in terms of what does the man need and what does he want. I think if marital counseling took place, like if I personally, I don't know, to be honest. So just to answer your question clearly, but if I was to actually say like, hey, if you want to come to me for premarital counseling, I would like discuss the differences between men and women so that expectations aren't, they don't have disappointment in expectations. One thing I heard, maybe you can confirm this as a counselor. Someone said, and I think he was a counselor, he said, a lot of problems in relationships stem from failed expectations. And so if everybody understands that men don't love the same way women do, and women love a different way than men do, and we clarify this, then everyone can start to appreciate the way that men actually love women and women actually love men, and not try and emulate it. Because what we have now is socialization telling us that men should be, defective women when it comes down to love.
Yeah, exactly. And God Almighty says, the zakara is not like the untha, the boy child is not like the female child, in the case of Mary, when she was born, peace be upon her. And that remains. Nothing can change that. Our socialization, our conditioning, our operant programming cannot change the fact that men and women are inherently different. Almost you could say we are different species. The way our heights, our brain proportions in terms of certain language areas. Women are much better at certain things. Men are better at certain things. Executive functioning is different. Even as a doctor, I can tell you, when I look at blood results, before I know the age, before I know the gender, before I know the race of that patient, I must know their gender. Because if I'm looking at man's results, it's vastly different to a female's results. So, we are multiple species, you could say. And this thing that we're equal, that, we should treat men like women and women like men is leading to a lot of breakdown in marriages. And like you said, our languages are different. We love differently. Men love to be admired, respected. We love that sense of accomplishment. That's been our case. Hence, we conquered lands. Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great. We love conquering. Women love to raise, nurture. They love to be loved, and we're not equal in that sense. So if you just give a woman respect and you just give a man love, it's not going to work.
No.
And we've got this real push now with feminism. First wave, second wave, third wave, neo-radical, etc., etc., etc. Extreme left-wing liberalism, feminism. It's all combining into a very toxic concoction in the West particularly, and people who uphold masculine values, Muslim values, we call it Sifat al-Rajula, being in man, as according to the Sunnah of Rasulullah and his predecessors, the four Khalifs, the Tabi'in, Taba Tabi'in, and the son of thereafter. upholding these values of chivalry and stoicism and being a man are looked down upon as being very anti-equality. In your experience, have you experienced any of that in living in the West, in Germany?
Absolutely. I mean, you can't escape it in the West. It's a very pervasive and pernicious ideology that is wrecking Western society in general. If if my opinion is asked, I think we can actually see it taking place with like just the collapse of families, birth rates, just overall societal cohesion. Even, I'm not a man who believes that multiculturalism really works, but there are understood societal expectations. Even this cohesion is falling apart now. And it's all just because guys and women, everybody's just checking out and sort of doing their own thing. And it all stems from like this ideology. This ideology, like I said, is pervasive. It really, I don't think they understand, or maybe they do, how much of a domino / knockoff effect that this has. You start in one area and it just completely, it's a foundational concept that if you knock it out, the support pillars or the supporting wall is going to fall out and the whole house collapses. And that's what feminism is. It literally tries to change women into very bad men without responsibility or accountability.
It's trying to metamorphose them into something that they are not.
Yes.
And it's dangerous because this goes against science. It goes against religion. And I know there's conspiracy theories out there that this was a communist kind of thing and in the 70s. And I'm not going to go into that rabbit hole. But the main things of the mind is leading to breakdown of families. Whatever metric you use, whichever metric, it's affecting it adversely. So breakdown of marriages, less children, later marital age. And I know as a doctor, above 30 and certainly above 35, you enter high-risk pregnancy. Your chance of Down syndrome or genetic abnormalities triples and quadruples. So you're entering high-risk pregnancy because women are getting married much later, they're deferring childbirth much later, and they're having sex much earlier. They're having sex at 14 or 15, way before marriage. So you've got and that increases the risk of cervical cancer. You're having 20 years of being on the pill. Why are you on the pill for? Like you're a teenager, you don't need to be on the pill. And so these things are increasing cervical cancer. So it's not only having a knock-on effect on society, but it's physical health as well, public health emergencies. This is. The other thing I've seen, particularly with Muslim sisters, is many are putting their boss or their CEO above husband, and they're entering their 30s, unmarried. And then they're trying to quickly get someone before they're married, and they end up marrying the wrong person or someone significantly older than them. And in a lot of cases, marrying non-Muslims.
Ooh.
So just, because their clock is ticking. And I've seen a lot of this, certainly when it comes to mindset coaching anyway. The brother's Muslim because he's married someone. So I think this is having a knock-on effect. We can't emulate these people because we have the Quran or Sunnah. We have the perfect middle path, كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس. You are the best nation أخرجت, brought forward for mankind. You are the middle path. We are Ummatul Wasata. We are the middle path. We can't follow extreme right or extreme left. We follow the beautiful middle path, not of the hermit and not of the hedonist. And I've seen this time and time again, Abdurrahman, where our sisters, practicing sisters, hijab, mashallah, practicing, they take their prayer breaks at work. A lot of doctors as well, a lot of doctors. And I hate to use the word, but they're hitting the wall and they're not even thinking about marriage. That's the primary objective in this life, as a woman, to raise the next generation. And you're putting that secondary. It's a huge mismatch of priorities.
Well, what I've noticed is, but with sisters in West, and in my channel, I've been like talking to sisters a lot lately, but I don't think too many sisters watch my channel. Sisters have drank the Kool-Aid. I don't know if you're familiar with that terminology.
Jim Jones.
Exactly. They drank the poison Kool-Aid. Yeah. And it's really sad to watch because the thing is, why would you drink this poison and we see the results around us right now? We as Muslims, we know what's up. We as men, we're watching what's happening to the society. We don't want it for ourselves. We don't want it for our women. We don't want it for our cultures, our ummah. All these problems that we're seeing, we don't want the promiscuity. We don't want the materialism. We want to make money and everything so we can take care of our family. But we don't want this just blanket, raw, disgusting, just, vomited out, like, capitalist, like, materialistic behavior. Because this is a cancer. Why is it that our sisters are not seeing what's happening to these women? And you can see it real time. We already have generations of women saying, hey, this was a mistake. And they're out there, they're saying it, and they're being, maybe it's because they're being drowned out. But I just find it odd that they're so willing, if that's the right word, if it is, it's unfortunate, to just sort of follow a path of failure, and it's clear it's failure.
Yeah, a path of
I don't understand it.
It's willful ignorance, and they're being blind. And as Muslims, we are supposed to use akal.
Yeah.
You know, God says so many times, you know, tafakkarun, don't you do fikr, don't you look at the ayahs of Allah in the creation, tafakkarun, you know, akal and, you know, basira. Basira means vision, but beyond that,
Indeed.
It means perspicacity, being perspicacious, being insightful. And our sisters, unfortunately, are just not understanding that they've got a clock. They're not like the man. You know,
and they'll get angry at you.
Yes.
If you tell them. They will come at you. They will come for you if you tell them that this isn't going to work. This isn't the way. They will be angry, bitter, vicious. And then, of course, you've got those brothers who, you know, they don't have that internal stoicism to actually say, hey, you know what? These guys are speaking some truth. It's just this. There's a sister and I want her attention. And so he's going to jump on your back. And then it just turns into a cascade of just wild, crazy people trying to attack you for just saying something that's so fundamentally, and not fundamentally, demonstrably, clearly true.
You can't outrun biology. You can't outrun biology, you know?
They're trying. They won't.
Exactly. These are objective truths. You know, Western liberals believe in objective empirical truth. This is as empirical as you can get. A woman's eggs decrease as she gets older. And even the remaining eggs, the quality is not as good. And we even know that as men. The sperm quality is not as good beyond 40 as it was when you're 20-year-old. You know, we know this. Especially now with the advent of mobile phones and tight boxer shorts and so many radiation sources and plastics and low testosterone and high estrogen in men, you know, so many things. So it's much better to get married earlier. And it's even more important for women to get married earlier. But they're just not seeing it. And feminism's spun this really malicious and damaging delusion that you can really have it all. You can have the career, you can have the looks.
Yeah, that's just not
really. Tell me one in this world who's above 23.
No, none of that's based in reality, and that's the thing, you know. And I think part of the problem is I can't remember who said it, but you know, they say that the female world, her emotions dictate her reality, and for men, his reality dictates his emotions. And feminism, it builds up this delusional fantasy world that appeals to female emotion, obviously because it's a movement made by bitter, angry feminists. And so they obviously want to sell an idea, but it's an idea that's not based on reality, which is obviously that you can have it all. And we all know that you can't have it all. You know, there's always going to be a trade-off. You know, even if you manage to have the family and the career, you're not. These are two specific fields that require specialization and focus. So that means if you're trying to be a mother and let's say a doctor or a really good doctor, if you're not just trying to be just an average crappy doctor, I don't know if those exist. I mean, kudos for being able to make it into being a doctor. But if you want to be good at what you do, you have to be laser focused. That's the same with parenting. You know, parenting is not easy, you know, so you have to be laser focused. Who's going to do that if the mother's not? You know, so you're not going to be a good mother. You're not going to be good at your career because you're between two things. You're just going to be really bad at both.
Yeah, just kind of average, kind of middling, you know, halfway.
At best average. Yes. Yeah. And so it's like, sisters, come on, you know, get it together. This is amazing. And I it's unbelievable because I sit here sometimes and I just, you know, I have multiple wives, obviously. And I look at them and I'm like, wow, they can like make Allah has made it so that they can make a whole person inside them. You know, after the will of Allah, there's nothing that can create another human. I mean, obviously the creation is by the will of Allah, but it's like Allah willed it that they can make a whole human. As much as I understand the science, it's still just unbelievable. Like you just ate like potato chips and ice cream and a whole baby's still being made out of that, you know? I'm like, what? It's amazing. It's a superpower. Why would you not want to do this? That's their superpower. Like I said, we may have to make, as men, we have to build ourselves into being superhero. But you got a superpower you're born with. It's the ability to reproduce. Why would you not do that? It's unbelievable.
It's
It,
inherent.
it's amazing.
They're born with it. It's inherent. And all they have to do is bank it at the right age. They don't do that. And now an increasing number, a record number of women are above the age of 30 are not married. And, we call them spinsters in Old English. I don't like using that word, but it's called spinsters. And if you're non-Muslim, you're Western, you're liberal, whatever, you're having your fun, you're having your, you're fulfilling that desire, if you know what I mean. But if you're a Muslim woman, you're chaste. You've not had a big part of life. This is a big part of life. And you've maybe never have it. That's just, it's like going to the grave and not eating steak or something. Missing out so much halal.
Ooh, yeah.
It's just, it's like, see through the BS, and I think having that perspicacity, having that basira, having that wisdom, hikmah, and channels like yours are really insightful. Actually, just to shed light on it. So, how has it been? You're talking about co-wives. How many wives do you have at present?
3.
3. Okay. And has that always been the case? Have you gone from 2, 3, 4? Have you always been 3?
3 tends to be my breaking point. I tend to somehow not be able to maintain 3 or over 3, but it seems like I have I've actually hit trifecta. I've found the 3 stables, and so inshallah, I plan on staying like this. If it doesn't work this time, then I'm just done. I'm going to stick with my 2 that have been like ride or dies for life. But I think I've actually landed a 3rd ride or die, so I'm not really looking for more. But this is 3 currently. It's very difficult for some reason. I don't know why to like maintain 3 or more. So
okay, I think pressures are changing as well. Women are, just perhaps a bit less innocent than they used to be with the whole advent of social media and all these kind of things. And it is a lot of hard work. And I know people in the media do get a lot of flack. I know a brother in the UK, from India, I believe, he opened an app for Second Wife, and that gained a lot of bad press. Because unfortunately, feminism instead, you can have it all. You can have the one husband, you can have the career, you can have this, and you can have that. And why would a man want to have a second one? Because you should be enough for him. And it's really spewing this nonsense. And it's much better, even in the Sharia, it's much better for a woman to be married to a man who's already got a wife.
Yeah.
To remain single throughout life.
I mean, it's also good for them. I'm not really sure. I mean, I think maybe you come from more of like, I like to call it ethnic Muslim family. It's like, your family for generations have been Muslims, probably since forever. Where I'm from, that's not the case. And my wives, even though they come from ethnically Muslim families, here in the West, they're alone. Mm-hmm. And so now, like right now, they're in the kitchen with kids, cooking, hanging out, talking, chatting, joking, whatnot. It's just good for them because one will cook, one will do the dishes, this, that, the other. They just help each other. They talk to each other. They can talk to each other and associate with each other and just not associate. That's not the word I was looking for. They can relate to each other in a way that I never can because I'm a man. I have no experience, living life as a woman. And they have no experience living life with me as a man. Despite the fact that I've been together with my wife for 6 years, if you and I were like to hang out like on a regular basis for like, I'd say 6 months, we would probably, if we got along, I think we would probably build a closer bond in terms of just being able to relate to one another as life experiences as a man than I have with my wife in 5 years. Yes. This is that brotherhood. So when you actually meet those people that you click with, there's trust there. There's, there's reciprocity. There's altruism amongst one another. When that exists amongst brothers, it's impossible. And this is why a lot of women get mad, both Muslim and non-Muslim, like, he's hanging out with his brother and is this. Yeah, because we have a bonded experience as men, just like the same way you have a bonded experience with sisters, as women.
Yeah,
and so.
Anything goes wrong, a woman's usually on the phone to her mum or sister or friend, because they want.
Absolutely.
And it's the same concept as men. And that's a very good way of phrasing it. Men's emotions are dictated by the reality. They're contingent upon the reality, and a woman's reality is contingent upon her emotions. And I think that's a very good way of framing our different experiences. So, in terms of co-wives and having multiple wives, what are the kind of biggest, forget the outside in terms of people saying things online and YouTube comments. What are the biggest obstacles, do you think, as a man who's been, happily married for many years with multiple wives? What are the biggest kind of eye-openers, I would say?
Eye-openers. Generally, culture doesn't mean much. Women are women before they're anything else. you know, the thing that brought me to this entire, like, ideology where I'm at right now and these, understandings, I was married to 3 different women. The first time I tried it, it was German, a Somali, and a Kenyan. And they all had a different mother language. They all had like a different religion until they came to Islam. They were all Muslim eventually, but the beginning initial religion was all different. There was nothing that unified them other than being women. And there was a day it clicked that because they didn't speak to each other, that I was about to travel and I saw my Kenyan and my Somali wife before I went to travel to Germany to see my German wife. And then when I landed, my German wife had said something to me and my Kenyan wife had said something to me before I left. And my Somali wife said something for me left. And I was just like, are they reading from a script? This is impossible. How are they all saying the same thing? It's biology. And so that's when it clicked to me. It's like the only thing that unifies these women is being a woman. So the biggest eye opener in having multiple wives is that you would be amazed at how very much the same they are in terms of like generalities from a biological perspective on what they find important, what's important to them in terms of their emotions, how all of that controls everything. It overrides religion. Surprisingly, it overrides culture, language. It's always universal, that emotional state and condition, how they view the world and how they perceive the world. It's unbelievable how strong that is.
Yeah. It's unbelievably universal. And that was the topic of a book called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And general applicability and across. And it's important, I know brothers in America have done some Islamicized versions of these books, like Yasser Qadi and Yasser Birjas. They've compiled a lot of psychological books around men and women's psyche and give them an Islamic slant, which are part of premarital kind of counseling courses. The other question I wanted to ask you is, with the rise of feminism now, and we've seen parallel to that, a real rise of men just being very lazy and just accepting the status quo. And you're saying feminism's there to stay. I can't get married because women want a big mahar. They want me to have this figure, blah, 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 blah. So they're accepting. And a lot of men now are single in their 40s, living with their mum. They're actually not even considering marriage because marriage is, the bar's been set so high now for them. They're still living with mum and I'm assuming virgins till they're 40. I don't know how they do that, but they're still living with mum. And it's just not natural in the West. So what advice do you have for kind of men to actually get married relatively young in terms of building themselves? Do you have any closing remarks regarding just building yourself up as a man and actually being confident and actually going for it?
Yeah. View all of these wish lists and all these demands of women in the same way that you would the wish lists and demands of a job. You apply for the job, right? I mean, they say 10 years experience, but you can't be over 20. It's like, what? So it's the same thing with these careers. It's a wish list. It's what they wish for. But the reality is, and I'm not saying that you should be a man that a woman settles for, but the reality is most of these women are in a delusional world. And you have to understand as a man that she wants you just as bad as you want her. You just are bad at hiding it. She's not. That's the difference. And when you can actually just push through what I'm going to call the BS, there's going to be a sister there behind all that barrier and all that garbage, that they've put up as a front that's willing to be your woman. Now, this is where vetting comes in, and where you need to actually check to see as to whether or not she's a woman worthy of letting into your life, which brings us to the next point as a closing point. Make sure you have a life that's worthy or that a woman would want to be a part of. And you're not doing it for her. You just, like I said, you're building your life because that's the life you want as a superhero. You call yourself Batman for all I care. You want to be the multi-rich, multimillionaire. You don't have to be multimillionaire. I'm not, but you want to have the Batman style, where it's like you're the best of both worlds. So be that guy to where a woman wants to come into that life and she wants to be a part of it. Because really, when you look at it, and it's not an insult, it's not an attack on women, but they generally have empty lives. They're looking for someone to actually come along and give them joy and happiness and whatever else, someone to control their emotional state, to send in the tip topsy because they want to feel. And They need men for that. We generally cause that to them, and we don't want that from them. We don't want a crazy emotional system, if you can call it that, as a way of life. So guys, just do what you're supposed to be doing. Be the best that you can absolutely be. And everything's going to work out. Wallahi, I promise you, if you do what you're supposed to be doing, it's going to work out. And when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, it's outcome independent from scratch. Just do it, go out, work hard, make your money, and take care of your religion, take care of your body. Why would you not want to be the best version of yourself?
Exactly.
Period.
Exactly. This body's been given to you. You can exchange your wife, your house, your car. You can't exchange your body. So this day, nobody's had a body transplant. You get one body, that's your vessel to carry your soul. Look after it.
Indeed.
We've got a nice Ferrari and it's full of dirt. It's not going to be as valuable as a clean
Exactly.
Look after it. Look after the engine. Yeah. And you mentioned vetting there, Abdurrahman. I think you've got a guide, haven't you? A vetting guide.
Indeed.
Online. Do you want to tell our viewers about that?
I actually wrote a vetting guide. My experiences were a little bit more extensive than I wanted them to be. And so, I was like, what am I doing wrong here? And that's where I started at, when everything started falling apart with my first 3 wives, and I just started getting married, divorced. I was like, well, what's going on here? It's not how I grew up. I grew up in a stable, 2-parent household. So it was really troubling to me, that I was having so many problems. And so I started looking at the issues and I said, okay, these are my problems. And then when I went back out after fixing my problems, I realized I was getting better results, but I was still getting crappy results. And I'm like, okay, if I fix my problems, then this means it's somebody else. And then when I started looking at women and their problems, and I started to realize, okay, maybe they're not looking at their problems. They're just coming into a relationship like, hey, I'm fine. Like I was going out thinking I was fine. And then I started realizing, oh, wow, remember, it's not my fault, but it's my responsibility. I'm letting these women into my life. It's not my fault they're messed up, but it's my responsibility to not let them in my life and come and mess it up too. So then I wrote the vetting guide because I realized a lot of men in my circle were making the same mistakes. And I was like, okay, guys need to actually take a look at these things, step back, turn off the hormones, and use that analytical, logical, high-powered mind that we have, that we use to build technology and fix people and fix things, and actually fix our relationships, know?
Yeah. I know you work in construction, so you kind of reverse engineered the process of matrimony. You reverse engineered it from a female's perspective. And I think that's powerful, actually, not looking at ourselves being selfish, but actually looking at from the woman's perspective on what kind of women you don't want to attract. And I know you've got a red flags list, and it's how can people find you? Do you have a website? Do you have a Patreon page?
AbuAmerican.com, and I'm Abu American on every platform you can think of. So just Abu American, but generally I have AbuAmerican.com. You can email us there. There is a Tito chat bot, but my chat bot has died and I'm not really sure why it's not working. So if you try and, catch me on the chat bot, it won't work. Instagram is probably one of the best places to catch me. Instagram and Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter. Instagram, I tend to have a faster response rate because just my Twitter inbox is it's full. So.
And then speaking of Twitter, Instagram, just one last question. I was in Romania a few days ago and met Tristan actually there.
Nice.
It's Censorship. And actually met the brother as well. You've had him on, brother Marital. So I met him.
Okay, Myron, yeah.
Met him about a week ago. So this, you've got Instagram, you've got Twitter for now. We don't know what the powers to be, what they do when they decide, and it's really frustrating. You're trying to push out content which will be beneficial. You're doing it for value. You're really doing it. Vetting guides, red flags, videos. You're actually doing it to stop divorces. You're doing it to get people married and stop the wrong kind of marriages. Yet. And you're warning people against the dangers of feminism and liberalism, all these kind of things. Yet, the powers that be will just slowly shut you down. And how do you kind of keep sane in this censored PC world?
It's crazy. It's amazing. I guess I'm kind of a visionary. I made a video about this too. So what I do is I make like 10 videos a week and then they go on a scheduled upload. So they upload every other day. And I made this video. I made like 4 videos on the way home. In the car.
It's like a reading of mind.
Yeah. And so I was talking about censorship and I was telling Muslim content creators that are actually out here trying to help the Ummah, I said, you need to back up your channels to Odyssey and Rumble. And so you can automatically put on automatic upload. So what happens is when you upload to YouTube, it automatically uploads to Rumble and it automatically uploads to Odyssey. And both of those platforms they don't cancel you. Odyssey is a blockchain based social media platform, sort of like YouTube. And so you can't block that. You can't block it. You can't censor it in China or any other country that wants to censor it. It gets through censors because it's on blockchain. And Rumble obviously is, we know that they're not going to cancel people. So even if you have a YouTube channel, it would be a shame that if you didn't back up your channel to both of those, because what happens is, let's say you have 100 videos, it'll back up those 100 videos. I have over like 700 and something videos on my channel. They all are backed up now. I won't lose a thing. So that's what I've been doing to take care of myself. So if they ever come for me, I don't know if they will. I don't think so. But if they do come for me, then at least I haven't lost all my content. The people can find me places like on Odyssey.
And we as Muslim men are told to tie our camel.
Yes.
Like the Prophet Sallallahu, the best warrior, but had two shields on. And in today's day and age, we just can't put it past some of these sisters to report. And I've certainly had a lot of abuse recently. And
they got Gabriel's monetization yanked. I mean, they came for him. They got his monetization yanked on YouTube.
Yes.
How long till he gets canceled?
Yeah, exactly. I think speaking the truth nowadays, it's become such a
revolutionary act.
Yes, a lot of these people just complaining because truth hurts. They'd rather have a sweet lie than the bitter truth. And feminism is a sweet lie, and we must see beyond that. Abdurrahman? Sorry, you go ahead.
No, I said, well, we make dua for our sisters, and we'll keep trying to spread the message to them. That's all we can do.
I mean, and you have been a revolutionary in this field with YouTube and various platforms, Telegram as well, and Rumble. Rumble's good enough because I know the Take Brothers are now on there with bigger viewings than they had on YouTube. But censorship is just very you always got to watch your back, and it kind of hinders what you can say. And as Muslims, we're supposed to speak the truth and speak truth to power. Unfortunately, some of the powers that don't like that. They get their feathers ruffled, and they really like to push you in a corner. But truth, we must go on. Boycotts happened in the history of Islam many times. People, Rasulullah, they had boycotts in Mecca, and they said Khadija died because perhaps from the starvation from the boycott. So we have to actually continue spreading the truth.
Absolutely.
It's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for your time.
Been pleasurable to be here.
And really appreciate your insights. And inshallah, the viewers will find some benefits. And like I say, guys, AbuAmerican.com. Just Google Abu American. You can find him on Twitter, Instagram. And there's stuff on Patreon, I believe, as well. You've got also your website. It's got his PDF. That's something where you can buy the PDF.
Yeah, I'm not really active with the Patreon. Patreon is just for people who just want to donate. If they want to just keep, So I buy new equipment, whatever else, because I generally make my Abu American pay for my equipment and whatnot. So if people want to support that, they can just subscribe there. I don't really update there though.
And your merchandise as well. I've seen some T-shirts with.
Indeed.
Yes.
From my Gumroad. Yeah.
Good. So guys, give Abu American a follow, a like, and have a look at the website. Abdurrahman, thank you so much again. Pleasure.
Thank you.
I hope this is good. Thank you.
Yeah.